everybody to God's Views on Political News. And it's good to see you. And hopefully we have the sound is a little bit better today. I keep hearing it going in and out. But Bill, how are you doing? Sound and all?
Sounds good. Sounds good. I don't know how I look. Just got in very late last night from a weekend trip to the left coast, and I'm worn out in more ways than one.
Yeah, I know. Well, refresh your soul, and you're gonna need it when you've been out on the left coast. I mean, it just seems like it's getting worse and worse out here and on the East Coast as well in a lot of places. Everybody's coming in now, and I just want to remind everybody, please feel free to comment and also to ask any questions during the show. Hello to Sue, Darlene, Rob, and Dawn, and Linda, and everybody else today. Hope you've had a great weekend, and hope your Tuesday and getting back in the start of the week is going well. We have a lot of things to talk about today, and I want to kind of start off, if we can, Bill, with the devolving society that we live in, it seems, these days. And it's getting to be sort of more and more prevalent and noticeable each and every day. One of the things that's been coming up lately are the increased violent threats that have been made against Republicans, typically. And I wanted to talk about a little bit about what is happening. A man was indicted for threatening to kill GOP Representative Diane Black. It's been barely a year since Steve Scalise, was shot at. Jason Lewis's daughters were threatened. A man threatened to chop up Senator Rand Paul's family and Rand Paul with an axe. Bethany says, "Hello, handsome." I guess that's your wife.
That was why I was laughing. I wasn't laughing because you were talking about these violent threats. And so just to clarify, everybody, I didn't find what Susan was talking about amusing.
Oh gosh. And then let's see, Representative Lee Zeldin was outside his campaign office, and a man was arrested for threatening to kill President Trump. I was throwing bricks through the window. Graffiti was painted on the wall. I don't know. Are you seeing more and more of these things, Bill, just like I am?
Yeah. Well, it seems as the substance of their arguments, seeing that it's non-existent, really, and they can't really debate based on substance, they resort to violence. That is the left, the progressive, because their general philosophy, it has so many holes in it that it can't be defended, really, not in a realistic and legitimate debate. And so it's like children, when they realize they've lost the argument, they turn to violence, they turn to bullying, they going to make threats, they're going to make baseless accusations, and that's kind of what I see happening. And unfortunately, that is probably going to get worse, and especially if the president and his agenda goes forward. Just kind of a sidebar, and I want to bring it back to this topic, but I saw an article where Justice Ginsburg, which is kind of an oxymoron, but Justice Ginsburg, who's 85, has vowed that she's got at least another 5 years on the bench, and I'm thinking, wow, she's throwing the gauntlet down. What if God has something else to say about the matter, and Trump gets to nominate another Supreme Court justice? I mean, can you imagine how they're going to just lose their ever-loving minds? So bringing it back to the topic, as they're losing the argument, they're resorting to these kinds of tactics.
Well, and Linda says it's lawless mentality, and Robin says it's a sleeping justice is what Ginsburg is. And I saw that where she said, Justice Stevens was on the bench until he was 90, and he stepped down, and that's what I'm planning to do. And obviously, everybody on the left, the progressives, are really worried that President Trump is going to get to put on the bench a couple of more conservatives, and they just can't have that. And then Alan said they have if they have any mind left on the left. But and also the justices, I guess. But I mean, it is really getting bad that, a Supreme Court justice who's not supposed to involve him or herself in politics, not really supposed to go out and speak about anything like that, has come out and said, don't worry. In effect, don't worry, liberals. I got you on this. I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to stay on the bench for 5 more years. I got this.
Yeah, I know this isn't our topic really, but I saw where, and I don't know if it was on the Babylon Bee or not. So I don't know if it was a parody or not, but I did see something where some leftists are offering to donate organs to Justice Ginsburg to keep her on the bench. So anyway, but back to the. There is a passage of scripture that I think applies here, and that it's in the book of Revelation, and it talks about how as things are culminating, as the age is coming to fruition, and Satan gets cast down, and he's really, really angry because he realizes he only has a short time. And that understanding that he only has a short time provokes him to just this intense rage and anger, pursuing God's people, persecuting God's people, trying his best to destroy them. And in my view, these kinds of threats that we see coming from the left against people they disagree with politically, I think it's more deep-seated than that. I think it is an indication that this kind of wrath that the adversary has for God's people is already being manifest in the earth. Now, that's my opinion, but I think it's pretty sound biblically, and because it's just intensifying. And it's just going so fast. It's just things are happening so fast in that regard.
Yeah, Linda says, yes, Bill, God made Trump her plan. And Luann says they need to put an age limit, 90, really. When you think about the Democrats, some of the Democrats in Congress are in their 80s, like 84, I think Dianne Feinstein is, and all that. We need to have age limits on certain positions because let's just face it, at 90 years old, And I know that President Trump is going to probably be one of those 90-year-olds that sit there and they have more energy than 20-year-olds because he already does at 72. But at 90, are you really listening? Are you really involved? Can you really compute everything as well as you did when you were in your 50s, your 60s, your 70s?
Well, no, no, you can't. I mean, I'm 55 and I'm already starting to realize I don't remember things the way I used to.
Yeah.
But no, but it is, it's just another indication of how threatened the left is, progressives are as it relates to, they see it as Trump or Trump's agenda. I don't know. I think it's more deep-seated, like I said. I think it goes beyond politics.
I think it goes beyond politics as well. And I want to say, too, that, all of this hate, and it is hate. It is pure hate towards the right. Bill, I don't know about you, other than the civil rights era, and I know you were too young to see it, but I don't remember this kind of hate. And I don't remember at all this kind of hate coming from one political party against another political party, or one person in politics against another person in politics, whether Congress or whomever. This is new. This is, for me, looking at it, this is end times spiritual warfare, demonic type of hate, and trying to avoid bringing in, that one world order that, is talked about.
Over the weekend, I was in Portland, Oregon. Well, technically, I was in Vancouver, Washington, which is just across the river. But I was at a conference, and there was another fellow there, a friend of mine, speaking. And the consensus that came out of that meeting, as far as the speakers, is that while there are some issues, as far as Mr. Trump's private life that, as a believer are kind of unsettling, disconcerting, or, at least we're being cautious about, the consensus was there's no doubt that God is using him. God is using him to do a lot of things. And of course, one of the things that, I was focusing on was the moving of the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. But back to the point, and this other fellow was really bringing it out as well, that what God is using him to do as well is to kind of expose not only the corruption, but the cabal where globalism is concerned, because
Yes.
he's more nationalist, and all of these other people that are coming so hard against him are all globalists. And this one fellow was just bringing up the point that, it's like the global cabal is against him, and for whatever reason, God is using him to kind of expose that, perhaps even break it up, and causing them to become enraged, because a global society is, at its heart, whether they recognize it or not, is a society and it's a mindset that is rooted in Babylon. And that kind of a mindset, which is something the Bible talks about from cover to cover, just about it, and especially in the end times, and how that it is at its heart, it is to come against God, against his kingdom, against the idea that the Messiah will rule and reign from Jerusalem one day. And I had thought about it, but I hadn't really put it in those kinds of terms and saw it quite in that light, but it really makes a lot of sense to me. And so then, as the president's agenda goes forward, you see all these, not only these Democrats and socialists and all this, but you see all of these so-called Republicans and conservatives rising up to try to impede what he is setting out to do. So as we go forward, and we realize that really, again, this is a spiritual battle, we're going to see more rage, we're going to see more animosity, we're going to see more violence, we're going to see, unfortunately, we're probably going to see bloodshed.
Yeah, I know. And that's the part that, I think as a Christian, again, we've talked about this before, I want to see justice, and I want to see justice now, because we're not getting justice. I mean, the people on the right, we're looking at this and everything is coming against us. And I know that we've talked about too, it's all in God's timing and all in God's plan. And it's not going to be here when I want it to be here or you want it to be here. No. But, is it wrong to pray to God, to say, God, please, show us a little justice. Is there throw us a bone, God? Is there anything that you can give us at this time to kind of, keep our hope up? Because it looks like that so much is coming against us that at times it's overwhelming.
Yeah, well, I think I've talked about this before, but there is the parable or the story in the New Testament where the Messiah talks about a woman who's going to a judge who's really not all that just, but she's going to him again and again and again and again and again, basically pestering him until he finally relents and says, yeah, okay, I'm going to listen to you. All right, I'm going to do what you need me to do. I'm paraphrasing it. That was to say that we need to be persistent in appealing to God for justice. Maybe we want justice, but how committed are we to seeking justice from the supreme judge? In other words, we'll say it every now and then, we'll pray a prayer here and there, but how persistent are we? How consistent are we as a people to seek him and these things that are just and righteous? And that's kind of where I'm at with it and in my personal life, and just as the body of Messiah at large. There are things we want. There are things that we desire. There are problems we see. We want justice. We want righteousness. But how committed are we to seek it? Not just half-heartedly. That's. I kind of think we're in a test. How bad do you want it?
See, and I want it really badly, and I've been very persistent. And so I was kind of afraid that I might be bothering God too much. But hearing you say that, I'm even going to be more persistent in asking for justice and asking God if it's in his will to bring that justice now, because I need to see some justice. I really do.
I understand. I mean, it can become very discouraging when you do not. And this is a thing, by the way, that runs through the Bible as it relates to Israel, the coming of the Messiah, the coming of his kingdom, deliverance, all these things. It's a theme that is recurrent in the Bible. And it boils down, in my mind anyway, is that when God's people are crying out, en masse, crying out consistently, save us, deliver us, that moves him. And then he begins to act. There is a season for that. There is a set time for that. I believe that we are in a season where, he's calling on us. He's challenging us. And we have to answer that call by just, pleading, just acknowledging that he's the only one that can save. So anyway, all that is to say, I believe that we're in the season that we're suffering, we're being attacked, we're being accused, all these things because the adversary knows he only has a very short time. And the challenge to us is how persistent are we going to be? So yeah, you need to keep pestering God about it.
I indeed will, and I will encourage others to do that. Now, Luann says, I hear you, Susan. Robin says, I'm persistent in praying for justice. Linda said, yes, he is testing our attitudes. And David prayed for justice just remember, God is seething and he will boil over.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. And it's not going to be fun when he does.
Yeah. And Sister Rena is joining us from DeLand, Florida.
DeLand.
I'm sorry, DeLand, Florida.
That's where Beth and I used to be on staff at a church down there. So we know Ceci. She's an old friend.
Wonderful. I'm glad you're joining us. Hope you come back and join us every week. Jonathan said, don't dance with the devil. He'll make a fool out of you. It seems to be working. Yeah. And there's somebody else from McCook, and Luann is saying, wake up, church. Absolutely. How do we get the church awake when it seems like a lot of the pastors are falling into the trap?
Well, oddly enough, I was sent an email. Well, oddly is not the right word. Providentially, perhaps. I was sent an article from a well-known pastor, evangelist, who's written an article about how leaders in God's community have fallen into the trap, as you put it, seeking other things rather than seeking justice.
Yes.
Looking for temporal satisfaction rather than seeking spiritual reward, I guess you'd say. And how he senses that we're in a season where God is about to act, or as it was put, his justice is about to boil over.
Yes.
And that you'll start seeing the effects, according to this man's, what he's seeing in his spirit. Mm-hmm. You're going to start to see people, leaders in Christian community who have sought the wrong things, being demoted, being brought down, and people who've been in obscurity coming to the forefront, so to speak, because in times past, in that season of testing, they've been committed, they've been consistent, they've been faithful, they've been speaking the things that God's people need to hear rather than speaking the things that God's people want to hear. And so it was just kind of an interesting thing in light of what we're talking about. Now, in where the onslaught, where the accusations, where the violence that is coming against, certain Republican leaders, conservative leaders, that, again, I think it goes beyond politics, and you're going to see, my opinion, you're going to see these kinds of attacks coming against those of God's people who are actually speaking up for what is right, what is just. People, like yourself, who go online every day and advocate for things that are right. Well, you're going to be on the receiving end of a lot of abuse, and that just comes with the territory. And through that, we're going to have to keep our focus on the Messiah and what is right and what is just. Because if we get our eyes on all the other things, we'll get discouraged, we'll get overwhelmed. An analogy I like to use a lot is the story in the scripture where the disciples are in a boat. The Messiah had gone up into the mountains to pray. It's middle of the night, it's wee hours of the morning, and they're in a boat and they can't get to shore because there's a storm and they're being tossed about, and all of a sudden they see somebody come walking to them on the water, and they're freaking out because they think it's a ghost. Then he calls out, "Don't be afraid, it's me." You remember, and Peter said, "Well, if it's you, bid me come to you." And he said, "Well, come." And so Peter climbs out of the boat and he starts walking on water. Now, here's the point. When he got his eyes off the Messiah and the storm, the waves, that's when he sank. My point is, through the storm, and that's what we're in. We're in a spiritual storm. It manifests in politics and social trends and cultural trends, but the storm we're in is a challenge to us to, yes, the storm is there, it's real, but we've got to keep our eyes on the Messiah, because if we do, we can walk on water, so to speak.
Yes. And Bethany said, and the attacks aren't only from the far left, unfortunately, and that's absolutely true.
Right.
And Linda wants to know, will we not see it in his church first?
It being what?
I think maybe where the pastors or they will be falling away, maybe the pastors of those that have been,
right.
consistent.
Well, I mean, that was the point of the article, I think, is, and that is a principle that we see in Scripture. It begins in God's house first. He gets his house cleaned up first, then he moves on to other things. And so, coming back to what I was saying, we want justice, we want righteousness, but how bad do we want it? How consistent and persistent are we going to be? Look, it is our nature, and I'm speaking about me, you, everybody that's listening, the body of Messiah at large. It is our nature to draw closer to God when things are going bad. And then when the crisis passes, we have a tendency to go back to what we've always done. I mean, 9/11 or the days after 9/11, everybody was on the steps of the Capitol singing God Bless America, praying, filling up churches, these kinds of things. 3 months later, we're back to normal. We're back to what we've always done. That is our nature.
Right.
But we've got to overcome our nature and, go beyond what we want to do and do what we need to do. And that requires sacrifice, individually, as a community, as a people. That's going to require sacrifice. So again, how bad do we want it? I know I'm getting a little preachy again, but let me throw this out at you. When we were all kids, we played hide and seek. And when we go to play hide and seek, somebody has to be designated as it.
Right.
Right? So 1 potato, 2 potato, 3 potato, 4, we figure out who it is going to be. And then we all run off and hide. It counts to 100, and then ready or not, here I come. All right. How fun would that game have been had there not been an it?
Not very fun at all.
We would have just been, hiding for no reason.
Forever.
Right?
Yeah.
Forever, right. So it serves no point. All right. So the Creator is the one who's hiding. We're it. And we're supposed to come find him. We're supposed to search for him. And how committed are we to finding him? How committed are we to looking everywhere with all of our heart, with all of our soul to find him? That's kind of where we're at. And because, again, it is our tendency to draw closer to him, to be motivated to find him when things aren't so good. And let's face it, today, things aren't so good.
Things aren't so good. Now, and they're worsening. And Teresa said, she just read where someone was saying that they received a word to not focus on the struggle. And I think that's always the case. I mean, I don't think that we should focus on the struggle. We should focus on what God is trying to maybe show us through the struggle that we see, and show us what we see in politics. That's where, but the focus is still on God and not on the struggle.
Yeah, the storm is real. The threats are real. And unless we get our eyes on him, it can overwhelm us, if not destroy us. So it's not to say that, we're going to ignore what's going on. We can't. It's real. It's happening. It's just that as we see these things, and I think you agree, these things are more than likely to worsen.
Yes.
In the days and weeks and months, and particularly if Trump gets his way on some things. And, I've just come to believe that God is using the man and his brazenness, his I don't give a rip what that guy thinks attitude to just pull the curtains back on the corruption, the globalism, this cabal to keep people under their thumb, to hold on to power. I really do. And I didn't think that way at the first, but I've turned around on that. And I really see that. And I really believe that. And he's kind of using him to break up some things. And the people in these positions are raging, and their minions are raging. And if he continues and succeeds, if that's the proper word, it's just going to get worse.
Well, and look at the immigration, issue and how bad that is. I mean, look at what the left and the progressives are trying to do to overrun America and basically overthrow America, if you will, and our government and our culture and our life and everything that we hold dear in America by allowing people to come into this country. There's been more coming in now because they're trying to come in under asylum and saying, I'm seeking asylum. There's more coming in now than there was under former President Obama.
Well, it's a fifth column.
Exactly. It is.
I saw a cartoon, I don't know, what's a comic strip from days gone by, and it was during the World War II era, and it showed it depicted. In fact, I think it was Dr. Seuss who drew this. It depicted the West Coast and an influx of people coming in from Japan and the Far East. This is back in the 30s and 40s now, and they're coming in and they're being given explosives and this and that and the other. And there's one guy on top of the shack looking across the ocean, and the caption said, "Waiting for the signal to act," or something like that. And I thought, gosh, that's kind of what's going on right now. You've got this fifth column coming in, using our generosity against us, using our laws against us. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that everybody that's coming in, that's what they have in mind. I understand that, but I definitely believe that there are a good number of people coming in with ill objectives. I mean, back in 1986, Ronald Reagan recorded in his diary how that he had met with the then CIA director, I think it was Bill Casey back in those days, and how in 1986 there was a fear that among those who were coming across our southern border, some of them claiming asylum, were people who were Islamic radicals. That was in 1986. Yeah. That was over 30 years ago. So I'm sure that has just intensified over the years. So you've got these people in power who I think would rather blow this up, that is America, would just assume blow it up and start over with something else that is even more favorable to them and their desire to hold on to power.
Yeah, I mean, you can see that the court system and others, Democrats in Congress, they're helping all of this occur. And they know where this is going. They're pushing it that way. And America stands in the way of a one world order.
Yeah.
One world government.
American and Israel.
American Israel. And right now you've got Donald Trump, who's standing in the way of all of that. He really is. And again, I keep saying this over and over, and I know, and people hate it probably, but if you don't get out and vote midterm and you don't vote Republican and you don't vote in 2020 Republican, you're going to lose the Republic. And you may anyway, and that'll eventually will happen. I hate to say that, but if you read the Bible and Revelation, it will happen eventually. Something's going to happen, okay? But we're not to give up. We're to keep fighting until that time. We're to keep doing what we're supposed to be doing until that time.
That is true. In fact, one of the messages that I was sharing this weekend was that God's people are described multiple times as his armies. Mm-hmm. And, an army is supposed to do one thing: fight, take ground away from the adversary. And when you take ground away from the adversary, those who have been held captive and who have been in bondage are set free and they're liberated. And of course, we're talking about spiritual things here, but there are a lot of people who right now are attacking those things that are good, those things that are virtuous, that the Creator loves, cares for, and wants somebody to reach. And the only way, this is maybe thinking outside the box here, but perhaps there are people that the only way they're going to be reached is that first there are some things that happen politically that frees them from the bondage they don't even realize they're in, opening their minds to things and maybe even opening their hearts to the fact that, God is moving in this country. He's visiting us. So I don't know where that thought came from, but just for what it's worth. But an army's supposed to fight. And have I ever talked to you about my admiration for George Patton? Have we ever
No,
discussed that?
I don't think so.
Would you like to hear anything about that? Well, when I was 7 years old, my dad took me to see the movie Patton with George C. Scott. And of course, if you ever seen the movie, a lot of language. My mother didn't know about it. If she had known that, she'd have probably pitched a hissy fit. But anyway, went to see the movie Patton, and it made a really huge impression on me. Very big impression. And Patton has been one of those figures in American history that I've always just read about, studied up on, just found him extremely intriguing. Now, here is my point. Patton was vulgar. He was profane. He was a prima donna. He'd get in the mirror and practice his, as he called it, war face. He believed in reincarnation. He would cuss when it wasn't even necessary. Well, not that it's necessary ever to cuss, but he would cuss when it was just totally unnecessary because he wanted to get his point across in a very profane way. And yet this very profane man had this belief, this conviction that God had put him on this earth to be a soldier, to be a warrior. And so he committed himself to that. He dedicated himself to that, to train, to discipline, not only himself, but others in how to be warriors. And let's face it, in the World War II era, Patton was more feared by the Axis powers than any other American commander there was.
Yes.
Because he was a warrior. Now, if God can use somebody like that who is profane, vulgar, a prima donna, full of himself, and yet believes God put him on this earth for a purpose, it should be an indictment. There should be a conviction in our heart that if he can use that person and that person acknowledges God's hand on his life, how much more should we as his people acknowledge that we're here for a purpose? We're here to fight on behalf of righteousness. And sometimes, yes, that manifests in going to the polls. That manifests in getting on and talking about these things that are going on politically, to fight, to advance what is good, what is virtuous. And so in sharing that about Patton, it suddenly dawned on me, we have a president who has a history of being vulgar, profane, let's face it, not the most humble guy in the whole world, engages in certain things that we would never want to have anything to do with. And yet he is bold, he is brazen, he's not beholden to anyone, he's determined to get certain things done. And it would seem God is using him to do that. And so how much more so should we, who are his people, have that kind of determination to fight, to push forward, to press against those adversaries out there that want to undermine the republic, and in so doing, create chaos in the world. Anyway, I got a little lengthy there, but
no, but also, it's a good point. I would rather go to battle with a leader like Patton and a leader like Donald Trump. And let's face it, we are in a battle, with spiritual battle. I would rather go to battle with them than say, I don't know, Maxine Waters, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, people like that. I mean, honestly, we haven't had a leader for how long? We have a leader. And I think God has put a leader in place for a reason, and all the reasons that we've been talking about. And go ahead, though.
No,
yeah.
I'm just saying I agree.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely true.
Well, as a footnote to that, I found out not too long ago that Trump kind of admires Patton as well.
See, you have more in common with him than you realize. And, I'm glad you've come around, and I've been praying for that to happen. And my prayers are answered.
Well, I still have issues, mind you.
I know you do, but I'm still praying too. So no, I'm just kidding. Now, Jeffrey said, I hear and appreciate all that you both are sharing, and I agree we need to have comprehensive immigration reform. That said, I think as believers, we need to ask ourselves, sorry for this, what would Jesus do? Or better yet, what would he think of how we as believers are acting towards immigrants? Yes, as I believe there are some very bad people coming across the border, and they must be stopped. But what about the women and children who are forced into the sex trade, or those being abused by the coyotes and the cartels? Aren't they victims needing asylum? It depends, Jeffrey, and I'll just answer that. I think we should treat all people with respect. And I think the people that are coming in as illegal immigrants are being treated with respect. They're being fed, they're being housed, they're given a comfortable surroundings and food while they're here. But that doesn't mean that we don't send them back. And people that are legitimately here for asylum, they will be given asylum. For those people that are being in the sex trade, we do take care of those people. I think it's the people on the left that want to make everybody believe that that's not happening, that they're being somehow mistreated. And that's just not the case. And if we go down to, children are being separated from their parents, and maybe bring that out as a point to show that, yeah, but that's not good treatment. But even with that, there was a reason for doing that. There was a reason for trying to keep those people, those children, out of being trafficked, sex trafficking, because a lot of those children are coming in with people who claim to be their parents, and they're not. So, and that's how I believe that Christ would want us to handle that issue, protecting them as we do. And the United States is such a charitable country. We've always given to other people, and we're still doing that. So I don't see that, I see that what we're doing is what God would want, but that's just me. And then Bethany says, thank God we are not required to be perfect to be used by him. And
yes, thank God for that.
Thank God for that.
Cool. Can I speak to the issue
Sure.
as well? What would he do in regard to this? The Messiah always promoted doing what was lawful, and even going beyond what was biblically lawful, even addressing the fact that you render unto Caesar that pertains to Caesar. If you will, you follow the laws of the land. And so that is a thing that we can see in the Bible from beginning to end. So I think, and I'm not going to speak on his behalf, as if I'm, him speaking, but through his word, I have example after example after example of how the Messiah promoted doing what is lawful. All right. Now, when you think about the sanctuary or the temple, by the way, there were borders, there were checkpoints. That's my word. But there were places that if you weren't of a certain tribe, if you didn't meet certain protocol, certain standards as it relates to being holy, you couldn't go in the holy place. You certainly didn't go in the most holy place. Only the high priest could do that. My point is, if you're going to approach God, he established it. If you're going to come to the king, then you have to follow the king's protocol. You have to follow his laws, and you have to respect his boundaries. All right. Now, I realize it's apples and oranges, but the principle is still the same. So when you're going to come here, for whatever your motivation is, if it's you're hungry, you're desperate, you're trying to get your children away from danger, great. I respect that. I still think that you should try to approach according to the protocol, the laws of the land, and respect those borders. To do otherwise casts a shadow over what you're doing. Now, I will say this as a caveat. There was a time when David and his mighty men, they were hungry. They went into the tabernacle and they ate the bread that was unlawful for them to do that, and they weren't struck down. So the Creator has mercy. He extends mercy. And there are times, that the law says you do this, and then he extends mercy. And so we should balance out what I just said previously with that fact. That yes, there are extenuating circumstances. There are those people who, among those people coming over, they're desperate. And, those things need to be addressed, and we need to consider those things. But I would still promote the fact that every other time David went to the tabernacle, he followed the protocol. He respected the boundaries. He understood the laws. So that's how I would address it.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things too, Jeffrey was saying, how does the church are supposed to witness to them? Well, the church can be as involved with them as they want. The church can go to their countries and be missionaries if they want, and they can witness to them over there in their own countries, and they can witness to them here. I mean, there's nothing that prevents the church from doing that if they really want to. And there are a lot of church who give sanctuary to them.
Well, you know what? Perhaps the prayer should be this as we address this particular issue, that the Creator would open up doors for those who have a heart to be missionaries, but to be missionaries right along our border.
Exactly.
That these people that are coming in illegally,
Yes.
and who should, by law, be sent back to their own countries, minister to them in the interim,
Exactly.
and even encourage them, hey, there is a way that you can come into this country and you don't have to be sent back. If you do it through legal procedures, there's a totally different outcome here. So part of our mission is not only to share the love and the mercy, but also share the discipline. That's what discipling is all about, showing how we are supposed to be disciplined. So there's a thought.
Yeah, I mean, and also, it doesn't say in the Bible to encourage lawlessness, so
Right.
you have to keep that in mind. And again, people who legitimately are seeking asylum can come to the United States and seek asylum, and their case will be heard.
There are, I think anyway, a lot of people who confuse mercy with condoning something or endorsing it, and it's not. Mercy is, you broke the law, but I'm not going to sentence you to death. And I'm not going to carry out the sentence to its full extent. I'm going to extend mercy, but that doesn't mean you now have license to go break the law. It's like I get a traffic ticket, and I go to court, and the judge says, you know what, I'm going to just suspend it this time. I'm not going to fine you. Just don't do it again. So his mercy doesn't give me license to go out and break the traffic laws.
Exactly.
It's just, he's going to give me another chance. So when we talk about mercy, about, immigration or, whatever the topic is, mercy doesn't mean you have license to continue doing the same thing. It just means that we're going to extend mercy. You're going to be gracious to you. Now, again, I'll go back to, if we want to really minister to these people that are coming in, then we should, yes, minister love, mercy, grace, but also discipline, doing what is lawful, doing what is right.
Yeah. Now, Sandra says, I have many coworkers that I interact with that are legal immigrants who strongly believe that there is a process to follow to legally enter the country. The key word is legal. And absolutely. And again, and I guess Jeffrey said, true, Rabbi, the key word is illegal when you were talking about. But I mean, the thing of it is, I think that we have to remember, nobody is looking at people and saying, oh, I'm so heartless. I don't care about people. I think people in the United States care very much about people. Again, we're a nation that extends charity throughout the world. You do care about them. But we also know that if you allow 3,000 people a year into the United States, some that are coming here because they want to be here, they want to be Americans, others that are being here because they want to destroy America, you can't possibly continue on and exist as a country. You will fail. What makes America great is the fact that, what we do and who we help and what we produce and what we manufacture. You can't do that bringing on a population that is totally dependent upon the government. And most of the people that are coming through would be that.
Well, look, as I understand it, one of the main priorities of the federal government is to protect the borders of this nation.
That's right.
Thus allowing you and me life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Right.
They're not supposed to be interfering with and get involved with how I live and how I pursue that happiness. They're supposed to be defending the borders so that I have opportunity to do that.
Right.
And yes, there are laws that are intended to restrict the evil inclination of man and to punish and show the consequence for when people step over those boundaries. And the immigration issue is, in my view anyway, not any different from any of the other laws. So when people step over the boundaries, there needs to be a consequence. Yeah, we extend mercy. And the irony of all of this is the people on the left, I just, as I was just said, I was in Portland, Oregon, and just this past week, there was this big brouhaha out there in Portland where these people built a wall, ironically, trying to impede the immigration officers that were there in Portland, calling them every name under the sun, just disgusting behavior. And they're supposedly the ones that want to show mercy and compassion to these immigrants that are coming across the borders.
Right.
They don't care about those people, because if they cared about those people, if they truly love those people, then they would tell those people what they need to hear rather than what they want to hear. They would teach them, you have to be responsible. You have to, you have to follow a certain protocol. They don't really care about them. Well, anyway, I got off on a tangent, but
yeah. And Bethany said boundaries are sometimes inconvenient and uncomfortable, but they are what provide our safety. And getting back to what you said about Oregon, the mayor in Oregon, Ted Wheeler, basically there was a whole bunch of protests.
You mean the mayor in Portland? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, the mayor in
Okay,
Portland, Oregon.
Okay.
Right. He's in Oregon. I think it's Portland, but I'm not sure. But anyway, recently the protesters came out there because they were protesting ICE because they wanted to have illegal immigrants coming in. And he basically ordered the police to stand down so that the police wouldn't protect the ICE agents nor the employees that worked in a certain building. And that's according to a cease and desist letter that was allegedly sent to the mayor from ICE saying, hey, you need to protect us. We're people here in the United States, and you shouldn't have the police standing down. We deserve to be protected. And they're saying, you need to apologize. And if you don't, we're probably going to sue you for doing that. So when it comes to a point where our own people in the United States aren't cared for, but people who are coming in and breaking the laws, whether through no fault of their own or otherwise, they are still breaking the law. If you enter illegally, that you've broken a law, that's crazy. You've got to protect the citizens of the United States. That should be first and foremost over anything.
Well, and when a public figure does something like that and tells ICE or the police department to stand down, that sends a message to the other side. Hey, do your worst. Take your shot. You've got an open door to do this. So just imagine what these attacks on Republicans and conservatives and other, people that are more in line with the way we think, as bad as the attacks are now, can you imagine what those attacks would be if we had, say, I don't know, a Barack Obama or a Hillary Clinton in office right now? They would be telling the federal agencies to stand down. They would be sending out these little subtle signals to these progressives and these Marxists and these leftists and these Antifa. Basically, take your shot. They would be their army, more or less, by proxy. And they'd be fighting a proxy war against you and me through these nut jobs that live in their mother's basement.
Yeah, and don't forget that under Barack Obama, when certain mayors in certain Democratic run cities and states, they were telling the police to stand down during Antifa. So yeah, it would be horrendous. And one of the things we talk about too is that President Trump gets attacked, and he gets attacked all the time. But there is somebody that I ran into yesterday on Twitter, and I want to bring this person's name out because he is running for a U.S. congressional seat in Oregon as an independent. His name is Mark Roberts. And what he did yesterday, in my opinion, was absolutely disgusting. And he continues to do this. So, for example, yesterday, Charlie Kirk, who runs Campus Reform, he was putting a tweet on Twitter that said basically that under Obama, Michelle Obama had 44 people, staffers working for just Michelle Obama. And that under President Trump, Melania only has 5 staffers. And he was basically trying to say, look at what a waste, of money and everything else that this was. And so this Mark Roberts comes out and he says, he basically says something about the first lady, infers that, I won't go into exactly what he says, but he inferred that she was a prostitute. He put hashtag #hobag and hashtag think dirty. And what this guy is trying to do, number one, I wrote back to him and said, what you have said, inferring that she is a prostitute, that the first lady's a prostitute, is absolutely disgusting. It's disgraceful. It would be that if he called any first lady that name and was disrespectful. But I said, your attitude and the way you are, you don't deserve a seat in Congress with your type of, disgraceful, unprofessional attitude. This man, again, he is trying to get donations based upon the hate that he's causing. And he told one guy that kind of responded to him that he's gotten like 50-50. 50% of emails from people saying you're disgusting, and 50% of the other people giving him donations because he's disgusting.
That sounds about right. I mean, I don't know which congressional district this guy's.
The second.
Is that Portland or Salem? Do you know?
I don't know. It may be Portland, but I have no idea.
Well, just as an aside, and if we have people from Oregon on here today, please don't take offense personally to what I'm about to say, but having traveled all over this country and been pretty much every major city in the United States, Las Vegas, Hollywood has nothing on Portland, Oregon. Absolutely nothing on Portland, Oregon. It's one of the most, I don't even know what the word is, but Vegas could take some lessons in debauchery from Portland, Oregon, as far as I'm concerned, and the mindset there. So if this guy's from that area, yeah, that makes sense that he would be this kind of person and say those kinds of things. And if you consider that, as you just shared, if 50 people are saying you're disgusting, 50% are supporting him because he is disgusting, that is a picture of our country. That's where we're at. And here is the problem with that. A house divided against itself cannot stand.
Absolutely.
It won't stand. And that's where we're headed if the Creator doesn't intervene, So going back to those attacks, can you imagine somebody like that in office?
No.
And what if the majority of those that were in power were like that, or who thought that way?
Now, Bethany said, it is a spirit of Esau. Give me what I want, or you're on my hit list. And it absolutely is. And it's showing, just an example of what we've been talking about, how the country is devolving, not evolving and getting better, devolving, because we're going into this pit of darkness. And Bill, you saw something too. I know this is off of politics a little bit, but you saw something that you kind of shared with me that kind of disturbed you. Why don't you talk about another devolving thing that you saw?
You're talking about the personal thing that I shared.
What you sent me on the tree that somebody had.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Sorry, we've talked about a lot of things. I just saw on my Twitter feed, and this is tweeted out by James Woods, the actor, who is, again, not the most. He's not the greatest spiritual example, but the guy is pretty bold in addressing things. But he tweeted out a photograph that somebody had taken of a poster with the rainbow colors, and it's got the silhouette of a man holding hands with the silhouette of a child. And then in the midst of the silhouettes, there's a heart. And underneath it says, love is love. And then at the top of the thing, it says, pedophiles are people too. So I was like, what? So we're living in a day and time, and you brought it to my attention that there's an organization that's been kind of advocating for this for quite a while, but there's this push going on now, and I'm sure it's emboldened by the fact that there's same-sex marriage is now lawful, that the transgender thing is being promoted and finding inroads into our culture, and so obviously they see this as a window of opportunity for them to promote the idea that pedophilia is okay. In fact, it was some college professor, somebody supposedly with an education, that said that pedophilia is just like homosexuality. You're born that way and you can't change it. So here we go. We're going to start hearing more and more about that man-boy love should be okay.
Yeah, and that organization is called NAMBLA, and that's the I think North American Man-Boy Love Association. They've been around for quite a while. Supposedly they're not as big as they used to be. I think they just changed names, but they advocated years ago for it to be okay for men and boys to be able to have sexual relations. And they've just come back stronger now, and they want the pedophiles want to be a part of the LGBTQ group now. And it's going to be, what is the LGBTQ group going to do? Are you going to accept these people in? It's very disturbing. It's very sickening. And this group, this NAMBLA group, a long time ago said, "Hey, you know what? We're going to get there. We're going to get to that place. We're going to get, your kids, basically, and it is going to happen." And they have subtly, quietly, like all these progressive left groups do, going day by day to fulfill their agenda. And it has become more prevalent now. And when you see signs like that, what you just described, Bill, I've never seen those type of signs until now about pedophilia and it being normal. And so that will be the next step, is that the DSM, the diagnostic manual that the therapists use, is to say that pedophilia is okay.
Well, two thoughts come to mind here. Number one, if any man ever touched my boy, he wouldn't be a man for very long. I don't care what the law says, and I don't care what society says. He wouldn't stay a man very long. But the other thing that comes to mind is the destruction of Sodom, Gomorrah, and the 5 cities of the plain. It's everybody pretty much knows that homosexuality was very prevalent in those cities, and that's a lot of people believe that's one of the primary reasons that God overthrew it, and when His wrath boiled over, literally. But what a lot of people don't know is that other historians give us a little background information and help us to understand that, when the angels came into the city and Lot told them to come on into this house, and then these people are beating at the door. "We saw these guys come into your house. We want you to send them out here so that we can have relations with them." By that time, it had become legal in those cities that these people could have relations with whoever they chose to have relations with. They were violent. They were forceful in this, and they legalized these things. So Lot pleads with them, "Hey, don't do this kind of thing. I'll send my daughters out to you," which is crazy to me, but but don't touch these men. And so my point is, they legalized it.
Yeah.
They legalized those kinds of activities and the violent way they tried to carry these things out. So it does not bode well. It does not portend well for this nation if we, as God's people, sit back quietly and just say, "Well, there's nothing I can do about it. These are the end times. Bad stuff's going to happen. We're just going to have to deal with it." No, we better be fighting, scratching and clawing, contending for righteousness every day until there's nothing left to give.
Yeah, Sue said, "That's right, Bill. That's how I feel. They could not run far enough for me." Beth said, "Yay, Bill." Linda said, "Probably they'll progress to LGBTQP." Jonathan said, "Are they the ones that are pushing this?" And pedophiles are pushing this. And Teresa said, "Would that give us the okay to use our Second Amendment?" Robin said, "It's very disturbing and sickening." And Sandra said, "Who would have ever imagined it?" I mean, seriously, you look at things now that are happening and you wonder who would have ever imagined that we would get this far down. Sue says it's evil. And I think, what we're looking at is, they always say history repeats itself. And history is repeating itself, from biblical perspective and kind of where we're going now. We're going into the darkness. We're going into depravity. And, it's all associated with what's been told will happen in the end times. Bonnie said, "Gay pride, equal pride goeth before the fall." So I just think that we're just witnesses to all of it. And I do think, when it comes to children, and Bill, I know you're the same way. I mean, you have to protect the children. And I think I would encourage people to get out there, and I don't care who is saying it's okay, because you're going to get people on the left saying it's absolutely okay and that you're a bigot. And that's the only reason that you're going against things like this. We have to stand up and we have to fight. Bethany said, "Throwing the babies into the Nike, the Nile."
The Nile is what she meant.
Nile. Okay. All right. I was I thought maybe there's a Hebrew word I didn't know that she was
No, no, I think she meant the
into the
equivalent of throwing the babies into the Nile.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so we just have to stay vigilant, and we just have to keep fighting and doing the righteous thing.
We need to fight. We need to get out of the being a servant to Pharaoh and the system and the culture, and I got to have my stuff, and I got to have my health insurance and all those things, and we just need to fight.
Yeah, look around at what's going on and know that there is a spiritual battle. You've got to get into that battle. We are out of time. It went so fast. I want to thank everybody. Your comments were amazing today. Your questions were amazing. Thank you for your support. Please share this with everyone. And until next week, God bless you. Take care.